The subcommittee will come to order. The Subcommittee on Border, Maritime, Global Terrorism is a meeting today to receive testimony on the role of unmanned aerial systems in border security. We meet here today at a critical junction at our nation's border and homeland security. As 21st century threats evolve, our country is facing new challenges that demand new solutions. At our northern and our southern border, we've taken critical steps to interdict the flow of illegal weapons, people, drugs, and cash. Since 2007, Congress has continued to increase border security funding, and as a result, we have doubled the number of Border Patrol agents from 10,000 in 2004 to over 20,000 today. Still, our nation's communities along our borders and coastal waters face a unique exposure to threats. And to mitigate those risks, we have to deploy a combination of manpower, technology, and resources to strengthen our strategy for securing our borders. Unmanned aerial system and the remotely piloted aircraft known as the UAV, or the Unmanned Aerial Vehicle, is a relative new means for providing real-time intelligence to combat illegal activity along our borders. For the past 5 years, this aircraft have patrolled our northern and southern border, providing critical intelligence to our law enforcement officers. UAVs essentially put eyes in the sky to give us real-time view of what's happening on the ground. In remote sections of our borders, these aircraft give us a window we don't otherwise have with ground patrol alone. UAVs are a force multiplier for our federal, state, local law enforcement as they provide the intelligence to help detect, disrupt, and dismantle unlawful activity along our borders. UAVs also give law enforcement and prosecutors the necessary evidence to prosecute criminals engaged in narcotics, human and bulk cash smuggling, as well as armed trafficking. Increasingly, UAVs will become a familiar means for providing our homeland security. Thus, we joined here today to discuss how the Department of Homeland Security uses UAVs within their portfolio to secure our nation. Many of us here today understand the challenges of expanding this program, and through this forum, I'd like for us to inspire new ways to overcome these challenges. Currently, there's 5 UAVs patrolling our borders, plus a most recent Maritime variant that just completed a pilot program off the coast of Florida this spring. After months of work with Customs and Border Protection, the Federal Aviation Administration, the first ever certificate of authorization to allow UAVs flights in Texas was approved this June, and we say thank you. Effective September 1st, this approval will allow UAV flights to patrol the Texas-Mexico border and the Texas, I thought that was Michael McCall, the Gulf Coast with shares waters where there was Michael, with neighboring Mexico. Keep in mind that the Texas-Mexico border spans 1,200 miles of the 2,000-mile border of the nation's southern border. Thus, deploying a UAV to Texas is a critical step in securing the U.S.-Mexico border. As a representative to the nation's largest inland trading port in Laredo, Texas, I can tell you that communities I represent are at the front line of the U.S.-Mexico policy every day. And Ms. Miller will, of course, in a very eloquent way, talks about the northern border and of course, the coastal that's so important. And as violence continues in neighboring Mexico, our communities feel the impact across the Rio Grande, the narrow river that connects our two nations. 2010 has reached a boiling point as turf wars and gunfire unfold just minutes from our neighborhoods. American families don't travel to Mexico as frequently as they did, and now Mexicans fear traversing the Mexican border towns to enter the United States. Since January alone, just miles from my district in neighboring Mexico, we've seen 2 consulates forced to be closed and reopened, 2 USDA livestock inspection sites in Mexico closed, then reopened on the U.S. side because they don't want to send their personnel across the river. Multiple drug-related shootings, pirates intimidating American boaters on the Falcon Lake, and other activities that have disrupted the lives of U.S. citizens. These are types of situation threats where putting eyes in the sky can assist law enforcement in monitoring patterns and practices of our criminal organizations along the border. And monitoring these situations will give us an opportunity to prevent a spillover of violence from Mexico into the United States. Moving forward, I want to hear how DHS will expand the role of UAVs as a means of border security in the future. lessons learned, plans looking ahead, and what Congress needs to do in the meantime. I do want to thank, of course, the presentation that the Assistant Commissioner, Mr. David Aguilar and all have made to McCall and myself and a couple other folks. We appreciate that. But, you know, we certainly want to look at how we can work with us. And as, you know, my standard language has been, it's not us versus you, the executive versus Congress. As we provide oversight, I'm sure you don't take that personal, but it's one of the things that I think we need to look at how we can work together as a team. So therefore, we're very, very interested in looking at the funding that we passed in the supplemental, waiting for the Senate. Hopefully the Senate will provide this funding, which is, in my opinion, one of the largest infusion of cash that we've added for border security, which includes an additional 2 UAVs also. But despite this funding, we have other obstacles to overcome. I know training pilots to fly these UAVs at home has proven difficult at times when similar aircrafts are being used in wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Today, I look forward to discussing, General, with you your view on how best we can attract and train and retain the UAV pilots to keep up with the pace of the new UAV systems in the United States. Specifically, we need to examine the challenges of training these pilots, the time it takes, and what's necessary means are to fulfill the future needs of this program. Then we look to FAA, who's the entity responsible for approving the flights of this aircraft system. I'm in particular interested in the process of how FAA approves the flights of these aircrafts, the safety implications involved, and the timetable for their approval. Specifically, we need to discuss how border national security requests for the certificate of authorizations fall in the query of other COA requests. And we understand there's from universities to ag to many other requests, but certainly we're hoping that this border national security are at the top of the line. As I understand, you have over 180 pending COA requests before the FAA, and priority is hopefully will be given to Homeland Security submittals. But what if there's multiple Homeland Security issues at one given time? Does the FAA have a contingency plan to place to approve UAVs to respond to multiple national emergencies? Americans know threats don't wait for us to prepare, and now is the time for us to strengthen our strategy for combining technology and manpower to protect the homeland by way of domestic capabilities in addition to our efforts abroad. UAVs are one more tool for us to stay steps ahead and leaps above the threats that we face, and they can help deter and prevent illegal activity and threats to terrorism against the United States. In the events of a national crisis, they will provide critical eyes in the sky for what we can't see or do from the ground. Thus, I look forward to our hearing today to examine and explore the role of unmanned aerial systems in providing border security, and certainly thank the witnesses for their time. For our ranking member, let me ask first if we do have a video, but we're having a little problems with the sound. Is everything ready to go, hopefully? Okay. At this time, for the ranking members and members, I'd like to view a video provided by DHS. It's a brief video clip, I think about 2 minutes and 25 seconds, to show us the capability of the CBP UAV program. And I think this will be good to give us an idea of what the UAV. So hopefully the sound is also working along with the video. Then
for what purpose, the gentleman from Ohio?
Stealth drone, so we don't need noise.
The ranking Miller said that it might be a stealth drone where there's no sound and nothing, and I think we can. If we're ready, if not, we'll continue. There's no pressure at all. Everything's fine. Well, as the young lady is figuring this out, I'm going to now recognize the ranking member of the subcommittee, the gentle lady from Michigan, Ms. Miller, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And perhaps at the, I'm just going to make a few short comments, and hopefully we'll get the video. I think it is important that we see a video of the capability of the UAVs, and I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for calling this hearing. Because, you know, as we think about what is happening in our nation, and one of the issues that we see on the news every single day is the Arizona law, and how that is a manifestation of, I think, a lot of frustration of citizens across the nation about our not securing our border. And what we are doing on the subcommittee, I think, is very important, because we have to think about all available resources that we have as a nation, as a creative people, of how we can secure our borders. And certainly when we see ourselves involved in theater in Iraq and Afghanistan, I mean, even in South Korea at the DMZ, here we are securing borders for other countries, and we can't secure our own border. We need to think about all of the resources that we have available. And I mention Afghanistan and Iraq in particular because we see the fantastic capabilities of the UAVs. And here we have a situation where the American taxpayers have already paid for this. This is essentially off-the-shelf hardware that has proved incredibly effective in theater with Al-Qaeda and smart bombs. And, you know, they're flying along at very high altitudes, 50,000 plus feet. And too bad if you lose one, but guess what? You didn't lose a soldier. You know, my husband was a fighter pilot in the Vietnam theater, so from another generation. But I told him, I said, dear, the glory days of the fighter jocks are over. The UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles, are coming. They are fantastic technology, and now you see our military sitting in a cubicle sometimes in Nevada, drinking a Starbucks, running these things in theater, and being incredibly, incredibly successful. And so I really appreciate us talking about these UAVs today. I think it's a very important, a critical component of a mix of resources. We are all very enthusiastic about the President sending National Guard troops to the border. We are enthusiastic about ramping up Customs and Border Protection along the border, not only the southern border, but the northern border. This committee has had numerous hearings about SBI-net, again, not only along the southern border, but the northern border. And I mention the northern border because the chairman talks about the southern border, and I always say this, believe me, I am incredibly sensitive and cognizant of what is happening on the southern border of our nation, with the drug cartels, with the kidnappings, with all of the terrible things that are happening there. But I represent a state, Michigan, along the northern border, and I always want to just make sure that we don't forget about the northern border as well, because we have incredible things that are happening on the northern border. And we feel that we're getting a bit shortchanged there. God forbid something's going to happen, and they're going to say, you took all these resources down to the southern border, and you don't have anything at the northern border that you need there. And so I just mentioned that. I don't mean it in a parochial way. I say it because I think it's a very important part of our evaluation of how we secure our border and why these UAVs are so incredibly important. Because the Border Patrol says that we only have 32 miles under effective control on the northern border, which is over 4,000 miles. I live on the Great Lakes, and you know, when you just look at the water as far as you can see there and realize the lack of resources that's happening there in the busy border crossings that we have, the busiest border crossings on the northern border in Michigan, the Ambassador Bridge, the Blue Water Bridge, which are the two busiest border crossings, the CN Rail Tunnel, the busiest rail entry into the entire nation. So again, I think having this kind of situational awareness that the UAVs can help us on the southern border, but also on the northern border as well. I would just mention that General Kostelnik and myself talked about a UAV mission at Selfridge National Guard Base, or at least having a ground mission somewhere along the northern border in my region over 2 years ago. And we were, and I'll have a question about that, but we were told at that time we would have a ground mission by 2010. And of course, now we're moving all of that to the southern border. Again, I understand, but I do think, and I would ask this committee to think about the northern border as well. And I'm glad to see the FAA here. We obviously can't talk about UAVs without the FAA here. And I understand everybody has a different mission, and we are all have an expectation of you to accomplish your mission under extraordinarily challenging conditions. Easy for me to talk about the northern border when you have Detroit Metro Airport there that has almost 500,000 sorties or flights annually. It is incredibly busy airspace. I know you have that problem in, I don't know if it's a problem, but you have that challenge in New York and some of the other areas you've looked, and you certainly have that in the chairman's area as well. But we have to be able, and that's, I think, what the subcommittee wants to find out today, how can we accommodate what is absolutely a priority for the nation and the Congress as a reflection of the American people, securing our border, and how we can utilize UAVs effectively, and we do need to have the FAA's help with accommodating all of that. Again, I recognize the challenges. You just can't start flying these drones without thinking about what can happen in a very, very, very busy airspace with an antiquated air traffic control system. No fault of the FAA, but Congress needs to be moving a little further along on that as well. But at any rate, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the subcommittee having this hearing. I think, again, it's very, very important, and we all share the same concern and want the same outcome, which is border security and utilizing every resource that we have available to do so. With that, I yield back.
Thank you again very much. And Ms. Miller, we appreciate it. I think this is too good to have, make sure we cover both the southern and northern border, and of course the coastal areas also. At this time, the chair now recognizes the chairman of the full committee, the gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Thompson, for an opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I thank you for holding today's hearing to examine the Department of Homeland Security's use of unmanned aerial systems in its border and maritime security missions. You've worked diligently on this issue, and I thank you for it, which is particularly vital to you given the district that you represent along our nation's border. Last week, I visited Arizona, where I heard firsthand from residents about the need to mow and to secure America's southwest border. So it is particularly fitting this hearing is being held today. Along with providing appropriate personnel and infrastructure, deploying effective technology is an essential part of the Department's border and maritime security efforts. I'm interested in hearing more today about unmanned aerial systems can assist Customs and Border Protection and the Coast Guard in that regard. At the same time, we know that this technology can be utilized in disaster response, such as the recent Deepwater Horizon oil spill. It is my understanding that DHS's UAS assets have been tasked with providing aerial images from the Gulf in the wake of this spill. Like my colleagues, I strongly support providing the men and women of DHS with the tools they need to carry out their vital work on behalf of our nation. However, I have some questions for our panel. Today, I hope to hear specifics about how UASs can help CBP and the Coast Guard to fulfill their missions. Technology is intended to be a force multiplier. Given the cost of this technology, we should have a clear understanding of what the American taxpayers are getting for their money. I also hope to hear about some of the challenges CBP and Coast Guard face in deploying UASs along our borders and shores and how we might be of assistance. For example, there might be a great deal of concern about the length of time it takes DHS to obtain a certificate of authorization to fly UASs in the nation's airspace. It is my understanding that this process has improved of late, which is good to hear. However, FAA and DHS must continue to work together to ensure that these CAOs are issued in a timely manner while still ensuring the safety of our airspace. CBP has also reported that a shortage of qualified UAS pilots is a persistent problem given the demand for such pilots in the military and elsewhere. If funding is provided for additional UASs, this pilot shortage must be addressed. To the extent that Congress can be helpful in overcoming these challenges, we certainly want to do so. Both CBP and Coast Guard intend to expand their UAS program significantly in the coming years. It is imperative that they do so in a way that makes the most of our limited homeland security resources. Certainly, the American people and border community residents in particular expect no less. I thank our witnesses for being here today, and I look forward to their testimony. And I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This time I ask for unanimous consent that Representative Carney, a member of the committee, be able to sit and question the witnesses at this morning hearing. Other members of the subcommittee are reminded that under the committee rules, opening statements may be submitted on the record. Now welcome our panel of witnesses. The first witness is Major General Michael C. Kostelnik, is the Assistant Commissioner of the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Office of Air and Marine, the world's largest aviation and maritime law enforcement organization. The general has served in the government for over 38 years. Prior to joining CBP, he was Deputy Associate Administrator for Space Station and Space Shuttle, the NASA. Before joining NASA, the general spent 32 years on active military duty with the U.S. Air Force and serving as a fighter pilot, experimental test pilot, and a designated acquisition commander, among other positions. His best qualification, he's also a Texas A&M graduate, Aggie, from the university there. By accident, Mr. Chairman, we also have another Texan from San Antonio. It was not planned this way. Right, Michael? And our second witness is Rear Admiral Vincent B. Atkins from the San Antonio area, Lamar, who's an assistant commander for capability for the United States Coast Guard. In that position, Admiral Atkins is responsible for identifying and providing service-wide capabilities and capacity, and for developing standards for staffing, training, equipment, sustaining and maintaining, employing Coast Guard forces to meet mission requirements. He previously served as the Deputy Director of Response Policy, where he oversaw the development of strategic doctrine and policy guidance for the Coast Guard statutory missions. Rear Admiral Atkins has served in numerous afloat, ashore staff assignments since graduating from the Coast Guard Academy in 1982. We also have our third witness, Ms. Nancy Kalin-Whiskey, which is the Vice President of Assistance Operations Services to the Air Traffic Organization at the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA. She's responsible for the overall nation's national guidance for the air traffic flow management, airspace management, information management, as well as the delivery of safe, secure, and efficient air traffic management and flight services for the national airspace system. During her more than 30-year career with the FAA, she has served in management executive positions in human resource management, budget, communications, flight service, airspace management, design, management, other sort of management, and aviation safety. And certainly we, as I said a few minutes ago, we welcome the FAA here with us also. Our fourth witness, Mr. John Allen, joined the Federal Aviation Administration in November 1991 and was appointed as the Director of Flight Standard Service in December 2008. He leads an organization of more than 4,800 aviation professionals responsible for the promoting safety for civil aircraft by setting regulation standards for aircraft agencies, general aviation, airmen, and designees. Flight Standard also is responsible for the certification and inspection of surveillance, investigation, enforcement of aviation regulations. Mr. Allen retired as a Brigadier General from the Air Force Reserves in 2009 after holding various command positions during his 31-year of active duty and reserve military career. And without objection, the witnesses' full statements will be inserted in the record. I now ask the witnesses to summarize their statements for 5 minutes, beginning with the General. But General, we're going to ask you, we always come up with practical solutions to problems that we might have. Since we're missing the the audio, we will ask you to, before you do your statement, ask you to narrate the video there. And I think hearing it from the General, this would be the best way to hear this. It was actually planned, Mr. Chairman, as we did this. So, General, if you want to go ahead and, why don't we run the video first, members, so you can get an idea of what the UAVs are and the stations and the work, and then after that, we'll start with your prepared statement. General?
Before we run, if we could hold it just a second.
Hold it a second.
Let me just set the stage. This is actually a historic event that occurred last year, almost at the same time. This was taking the Predator UAS to Oshkosh, the largest gathering of manned aviators in the world, and because there's been such a debate on see and avoid an aircraft, we're there routinely with other members of the federal government showcasing military aviation capabilities across the spectrum of missions, but in the last couple of years, we've always brought the Predator B model, which is has a wingspan about 4 feet, very small, sits on the table, and we show video to all the traveling pilots that come through the displays at Oshkosh, and almost to a person, they all thought that that little 4-foot thing was a Predator. In reality, the Predator B, the MQ-9, which is the military Reaper that we fly, is a very large aircraft. It's 66-foot wingspan, it's 10 foot tall, it's 36 foot long. It's unmistakable. So at the request of the Experimental Aircraft Association and with the partnership and support of the FAA, last year we brought the Predator. You'll see that we're trucking in the control set so we can land it. We flew the Predator across through the national airspace, landed at Oshkosh, and then for a week had that aircraft on display for the American public that travels and would be most affected by the risk of unmanned aviation in the national airspace. Come by, talk to the pilots, look at the control set, see the aircraft, and to a person, I believe they came away with a different perspective of the system, the risk, and the mission that that aircraft does. As an aside, last year was a difficult year financially. There was another aircraft that was there, the Airbus A380, the largest airplane in the world. According to the EAA, in their own words, attendance at Oshkosh last year was up 30%, 36%, and it was up primarily due to one of the smallest aircraft there, the Predator UAS, and one of the largest. So what you'll see, and I'll narrate through, this is our short vignette of our experience at Oshkosh Air Venture last year. And you could run it and I'll narrate. We obviously trucked the ground control station. This is the formal system that we fly the airplane with, and you'll see it being disassembled. This is our director who runs our Oshkosh show, and in the background, you'll see the classic MQ-9, the aircraft that the military calls the Reaper, the aircraft that we call the Predator. Ours are unarmed, but have all of the other systems. And you can see it's a very large aircraft. And this is in the early days of the show when we've flown the aircraft in. People will get a chance to look at the systems, look at the capabilities. You can see in the forward part an electro-optical ball. This provides this type of video, so the aircraft sees in multiple spectrums, electro-optical, which is low light level TV. This is inside view looking at the imagery. This is the kind of imagery that we'll get in the ground. This is the actual control set. That's the pilot on the left side flying the displays that he's looking out through cameras, and either the EO or FLIR ball looking out the front. This is typical of the kind of imagery. It's a movable ball, so you can look around, you can clear, and you're doing it in multiple spectrums. The EO optic, this is what it looks like looking behind the airplanes. This is some of the image that we actually took during the hurricanes support a couple years ago. Mr. Crow is one of our most experienced launch and recover pilots. This is the crown jewel of UAS operations, those that actually take off and land the Predators. And this is typical of the kind of imagery that we take, during our mission sets. And there are concerns about privacy that have been raised, but if you look at the type of imagery that we're taking, the things we're looking at and where we are, we're really on solid ground in those regards. This is the air pavilion behind it, just different vignettes of the equipment on the inside, and what you're looking at is the kind of displays that the pilots have. All of our crews are FAA certified pilots. Both the left seat pilot and the right seat sensor operator are FAA certified pilots, all part of our risk reduction program, and that just gives you a good sense. It's a very popular show, and I think it offered a new perspective to the aviators when they saw the size of the airplane, the fact that it wasn't something programmed on its own, but something being hand-flown virtually through the satellite infrastructure that came away with a different sense. And I think the rest is probably repetitive.
Thank you for that narration. We appreciate it. Why don't we go ahead, General, why don't we go ahead and go with your actual statement? Okay. And then we'll proceed at that time. So you're recognized for 5 minutes to summarize your statements.
Chairman Thompson, Chairman Cuellar, Ranking Member Miller, thank you for your leadership and thanks for this committee's support of Homeland Security's security mission. Air Marine is a very small organization on world standards, but in this area of flying unmanned vehicles, we are setting policy. We are the world leaders in Homeland Security. The Department of Defense has many more aircraft and a lot more experience overseas, but in the homeland, You might be surprised to know that we're the world's second largest operator of the Predator B, this large Predator system that I've shown. There's about 35 aircraft in the Air Force inventory, and at the end of this year, we could have as many as 10 operational in our own. But on the world stage, taking these high-end mil-spec DoD technologies and applying them in the homeland, that is a unique skill. That is a unique talent. And on the world stage, there is no organization that is more capable or more experienced for applying these technologies safely and effectively in the homeland. We've been operational for more than 5 years. We've flown more than 6,000 hours. We've flown the southwest border and the northern border on routine operations. In North Dakota, we've deployed, Congressman Miller's point, to upstate New York. We've flown in partnership with our Canadian brothers along the St. Lawrence Seaway. While those have been routine operations helping to secure the nation's border as part of a more complete secure border strategy, when we lay these assets down, people of all types wonder, why are these things here? They're concerned about this or that. We're there for a security reason, but once we're there, we can do a great many things. In fact, 3 years ago, when we had the unprecedented flooding in Iowa that caused a lot of problems, we could have put our assets into play to help there, but there wasn't the vision, there wasn't the thought, there wasn't the process. We didn't really quite have the capability. But 2 years ago, the leadership in the state of North Dakota, and it was bipartisan, both sides, specifically requested that we would help them in their time of need in terms of flood. And so 2 years ago, we flew the floods in North Dakota. We got a great response from the FAA, short notice emergency codes. We're able to support that flood. Last year, or this past year, we flew the floods not only in North Dakota, but also in Minnesota as a result of our experience in North Dakota. And of course, we're into hurricane season down the part of the country where I come from, the Gulf, and we flew 2 years ago all 3 hurricanes during that time period, again with the support and the cooperation of the FAA. And these were, unique and first ever applications of this technology in those type of, contingencies. Part of that experience was an unmanned flight that took off from NAS Corpus Christi and flew all across the country up to Delaware, taking synthetic aperture radar cuts of all the significant infrastructure along the coast of the United States. That is in our databases, and now from those same stills, if we get hurricanes in those same areas this year, we can, after the event, fly the same aircraft with the same technology and do before and after difference analysis with our help from the NGA, and from that we can determine early on significant infrastructure damage to dikes, dams, marinas, bridges, all of those kinds of things. I mean, a great new application of technology, and while we're moving aggressively in this area to protect the country from terrorists, to support our missions in immigration and narcotics interdiction, who could have imagined the Deepwater Horizon event? And we're currently operational with both a Predator B, which we borrowed temporarily from our friends in North Dakota, that will return to the northern border. We have our joint aircraft, the Guardian, flown jointly by the U.S. Coast Guard as well as CBP, stationed out of Cape Canaveral, and for the last 2 weeks, we've been flying nightly missions in support of the Deepwater Horizon events, using the unprecedented forward-looking infrared with special maritime filters to create a unique database, feeding this information live to key management infrastructures, not only in the Gulf, but in other places across the country. This, I think, conversation will be not only about performance and capability, but clearly about risk, given my friends with the FAA that are here. These aircraft are not without their risk. We're well early into this system, and there's a wide variety of capability with our UAS. Everything from small handheld things to very large things. What should be allowed to fly in the national airspace and why? I think there's 4 things that capture this succinctly. 1, what system you're flying. 2, ours is the most experienced in the world, more than 1 million operational flight hours. 2, where you're trying to fly. 3, when you're trying to fly, all risk things. And finally, the last W is the most important, why you're trying to fly. U.S. Customs and Border Protection is a part of the Department of Homeland Security. We're flying to protect the country. We're trying to do the things to prevent a 911 that certainly, if there was a recurrence, would put these aircraft into that same mode. I look forward to your questions and appreciate your help in supporting this area. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, General, for your testimony. At this time, we now recognize Admiral Atkins to summarize his statements for 5 minutes.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Congresswoman Miller, Chairman Thompson, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. As the Coast Guard Assistant Commandant for Capabilities, I'm honored to appear before you today to talk about the utility of unmanned aircraft systems to secure our maritime borders, as well as support the full range of Coast Guard missions to the benefit of U.S. economic and environmental security. With our unique combination of civil and military authorities, the Coast Guard serves as the nation's principal maritime law enforcement authority and lead federal agency for maritime homeland security. Our broad responsibilities extend from our inland waters to the Great Lakes to over 95,000 miles of coastline and into the high seas. In support of this security mission, the Coast Guard and other government agencies employ a layered defense in-depth strategy to prevent the entry of illicit contraband and people across a broad and asymmetric maritime border. In general terms, national security is a concerted effort to prevent attacks within the United States, reduce our nation's vulnerability to terrorism, and to protect our resources and commerce. In the maritime environment, this not only includes our physical borders, but the exclusive economic zone and also the approaches to these areas and in those areas between our ports of entry. To provide this security, it is imperative that the Coast Guard maintain a high degree of maritime domain awareness, or MDA, across a vast and geographically diverse region. When integrated with our manned air and surface assets, the Coast Guard sees great promise for land and cutter-based UAS in support of maritime security. While the Coast Guard operates jointly with our partner agencies, we often perform as a sole entity, typically due to our mission and/or geography. This is most apparent in long-range counter-drug and counter-migrant operations from the equatorial Pacific off Central and South America to the deep Caribbean. In terms of fisheries protection and enforcement operations, we operate from the far reaches of the Bering Sea along the maritime boundary line to the Georges Bank in the North Atlantic. Also in the North Atlantic, the Coast Guard monitors and tracks ice movements, ensuring the safety of heavy commercial shipping. And closer to home, we protect our ports and waterways, shores, and living marine resources from foreign and domestic threats. Homeland Security missions, both civil and military, benefit from improved maritime domain awareness, which in turn is improved by persistent surveillance provided by unmanned aircraft systems. To achieve this UAS capability, the Coast Guard is leveraging partnerships with Customs and Border Protection, the U.S. Navy, the Federal Aviation Administration, and other federal UAS users. Our goal is to identify best practices, minimize risk to future UAS acquisition and operations, and to understand how to best integrate land and cutter-based UAS into our broad mission set. With CBP, the Coast Guard created a joint program office which has since facilitated the development, testing, and fielding of maritime version of the Predator, also known as the Guardian. Coast Guard pilots jointly operate the Guardian UAS and assist in developing tactics, techniques, and procedures for maritime UAS operations. We look for operational opportunities to understand how to leverage UAS maritime capabilities, including the support of the interagency response to Deepwater Horizon, and also in future counter-drug missions. We are working with the Navy on their Fire Scout program to better understand shipboard rotary wing UAS applications. Additionally, the Coast Guard is part of an interagency effort to safely integrate unmanned aircraft into the National Airspace System. The congressionally mandated UAS Executive Committee is a highly active and collaborative effort and represents the best opportunity for successfully integrating unmanned aircraft into the NAS. Sir, the Coast Guard believes there's a real role for UAS and maritime security, and we appreciate this subcommittee's oversight and guidance as we move forward to realize these benefits. Thank you, and I stand ready to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for your testimony. At this time, I'd like to recognize Ms. Kalinowski to summarize her statement for 5 minutes on behalf of herself and Mr. Allen.
Thank you very much, Chairman Cuellar, Congresswoman Miller, and distinguished members of the committee. The FAA appreciates the invitation to come speak to you today in support of both our missions, the FAA, CBP, and Coast Guard. The FAA sets the parameters for where an unmanned aircraft system may be operated and how these operations may be conducted safely in the national airspace system. Our main focus when evaluating UAS operations in the National Airspace System is to avoid any situations in which an unmanned aircraft would endanger other users of the NAS or compromise the safety of persons and property on the ground, as Mrs. Miller said. The FAA recognizes the great potential of unmanned aircraft in national defense and homeland security, and as such, we strive to accommodate the DoD and the DHS's needs for UAS operations. But we must do so without jeopardizing the safety of the national airspace system. Currently, if a government agency or a public university or a state or local law enforcement organization wishes to fly an unmanned aircraft system in the civil airspace, the FAA may grant a certificate of waiver or authorization, commonly referred to as a COA. The proponent applies to the FAA for a COA detailing what and how they intend to fly the UAS in the airspace. The FAA works with the proponent to mitigate any risks that flying the UAS in the civil airspace may present. Risk mitigations frequently include special provisions unique to the requested type of the operation. For example, the applicant may be restricted to a defined airspace or restricted to operating during certain times of the day. The UAS may be required to have a transponder, or if it's expected to be flown in a certain type of airspace, a ground observer or an accompanying chase aircraft may be required to be the eyes of the UAS. Other safety enhancements may be required, also depending upon the nation of the proposed operation. I have more information later on about this COA process, which I can go into detail if the committee wishes. As noted by Congressman Thompson, we have recognized the need to streamline our process for evaluating COA applications. To address the timeliness concerns of the applications, the FAA is working to simplify the COA process and has also increased the staffing levels by more than a dozen people. The FAA is working better to standardize the review process and to increase communication and transparency between our partner agencies and the applicants. We take this process very seriously, and while we are taking specific steps to improve the COA process, we are always going to take the time we need to ensure that these operations can be conducted safely in the NAS. These efforts are already showing improvements. In 2009, we issued 146 COAs, but so far this year, we have issued 122 COAs in the first 6 months, and we are on track to issue over 200 this year. At the current time, we have over 268 active certificates of authorization on 133 different aircraft types. They've been issued to 151 different proponents. The CBP currently has 11 COAs issued to them. Normally, the COAs are worked on a first-come, first-served basis. However, if an agency such as Customs and Border Protection has a priority mission request, it receives priority consideration from the FAA. And as General Kostelnik discussed, we also recognize that there are emergency and disaster situations where the use of UASs can save lives and help our first responders. To address these situations, we do have special disaster COAs and emergency COAs that can be issued in a matter of hours or even minutes, and we have responded to the CBP in this manner. We are also working with our partners in government and the private sector to advance the development of UASs and their ultimate integration into the NAS. First, in accordance with 2009 defense reauthorization, the DoD and FAA have formed the executive committee that Admiral Atkins just referred to, the XCOM, to focus on conflict resolution and identification of range policy, technical issues, and procedural concerns rising from the integration into the NAS. And we have also included the Department of Homeland Security and NASA to more capture broadly the other federal agency concerns and missions. The focus of this USCOM is to enable an increased and ultimately a routine access of federal public UAS operations into the NAS to support all of our missions. We thank the Congress for enabling the formation of the XCOM to advance the work of UAS integration. Unmanned aircrafts are a promising new technology, but one that was originally and primarily designed for military purposes to support the warfighter. And although the technology incorporated into UASs has advanced, their safety record warrants careful review. We are trying to integrate the aircraft into the nest, but we need to continue to take a very hard look at the risks that UASs pose to the aviation community and the traveling public, as well as the risk to persons or property on the ground. We seek to balance our partner agencies' security, defense, and other public needs with the safety of the national airspace system. We will not compromise the safety of the national airspace system. We look forward to continuing to work with our partners, and we thank you, the Congress, and especially this committee, for the guidance that you have given us, the support that you personally, Chairman Cuellar, and your committee have provided to the Customs and Border Protection and the Coast Guard missions to further enable this partnership. Thank you.
Thank you again very much, and again, to all the witnesses, thank you for being here with us. I'd like to remind each member that he or she will have 5 minutes to question the witnesses, and I now recognize myself for questions. Let me, General, let me go ahead and ask you this particular question. Give me the overall vision of what the UAVs will be as part of the border security. In other words, summarize what we were talking about yesterday. What does that mean for the southern border? What does that mean for the northern border? What does that mean for the coastal area when we talk about the UAV program?
Thank you, sir. Our program is a growing and a planned program, and for the last several years, each year, we have provided the Congress a formal strategic vision, a strategic plan for where we're going. In my view, our UAS program has always been a part of the more comprehensive Secure Border Initiative program. While mostly that's been associated with defense and ground-based radars, the UAVs have always been the virtual air piece. We purposely laid down our infrastructure where the Air National Guard infrastructure is, where they are flying the wartime Predator missions overseas, our AMOC in Riverside, California. North Dakota, the hooligans up there fly Predators overseas. We're going into NAS Corpus Christi. We're going into Syracuse for our maintenance facilities. They fly Predators overseas. Our focus is to provide the air picture in concert with our manned aviation and our ground-based technology and aviation systems to provide a complete border security net. Not that it would ever be every piece of space 24/7, but providing the right type of manned or unmanned capability at the right time, at the right place, to provide the security, that's needed. We've targeted our laydown into places like Sierra Vista, given the focus on the southwest border, or into North Dakota, given the focus on the northern border in concert with the 5 manned aviation branches we've stood up in the last 5 years. We've deployed and explored operations out of New York State. We're now going in, with your help, into Corpus Christi. That'll be the next base that we stand up, and we're over at the Cape. So we're starting to lay down, and as through our program, we lay down other sites. There'll be other additional sites on the northern border, such that when we reach the end game of our complete laydown, not only will we have the capability to do daily and routine border security ops supporting immigration, narcotics interdiction, and terrorist activities, but also with those laydowns, we're uniquely placed to respond to contingencies of all kinds. Natural ones like the floods in the north and the hurricanes in the south, environmental ones like the Deepwater Horizons event, but most importantly, I believe this capability, and Ms. Kalinowski was right, I mean, this is based on wartime capability, but these things have found so much use overseas. Why wouldn't we use the same technology to protect ourselves in the homeland that we apply overseas to do that mission there? And increasingly with the Uganda event, Mumbai not too long ago, it's clear that, the world is increasingly an unsafe place, and one needs to be prepared for the unexpected. Now, UASs are not a panacea. They don't do anything themselves. They must work in conjunction with manned assets. But if you look honestly at the technology, this single aircraft can do things none of the other aircraft in the Department of Homeland Security can do in a package. And I think those kind of capabilities, kind of set the stage. We're early on in that maturation process. We're clearly still growing. We're clearly still learning. The technology is well in advance of the national policy and the vision for national use, but that will come with your help and your leadership in a measured way. But the difficult things, the technologies that we should be applying, we're getting very good at. And And I would offer that while these things are not without their risk, we actually do have a good safety record for this aircraft in this homeland in the way we fly it with our efforts. So that's our way ahead.
And of course, on the safety issue, do everything possible. I know the FAA is in charge of that, but again, make sure there's no linkage losses and all that. Just do everything possible to make sure we provide that safety, because especially some of those drones will be flying over populated areas, and we certainly want to make sure that we do everything possible on that. The other point that I want to mention, I got a note from the Texas Sheriff's Association that was asking about, General, about what, as you provide that real-time information, and I assume it goes directly to Border Patrol, is that correct?
It's actually a wide variety of users. Some of it could go to any one of our intel functions. We can stream the video sometimes to some of the DoD components in concert with other missions. Once it goes to the Air Marine Operational Center in Riverside, it can be distributed to users anywhere in the country. In fact, we can stream our information across the ordinary internet channels with very low levels of encryption, because really there's most of the images there's not a lot to be concerned with. So if I had an aircraft flying today and we were wired to the internet, I could show you live video from one of our aircraft today. And while it might be not the resolution you want on a TV monitor, it gives leadership wherever you have, whether it's here in the country or out in the field, at a command and control infrastructure, at emergency management response, you know, unbelievable situational awareness about what's going on in real time. When we flew the hurricanes 2 years ago, we were feeding that image not only to FEMA sites across the country, but to headquarters sites at DHS and CBP, and you could see real time as a Predator flew by an oil derrick whether there was a leak in that derrick or not. I mean, that kind of information is priceless in the sense of commercials.
Right. And I assume, but the intent is to work with our other partners, state and local, depending on the situation, whether you use a fusion center or whatever the case might be, but there is an intent to work with our local folks, is that correct? Local and state?
Yes, sir. As a matter of policy, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, aviation, and maritime law enforcement assets not only support CBP, Border Patrol, OFO missions, all Department of Homeland Security missions, but outside agencies, including DEA, FBI, and others, and we are there once we're in a locale. Now, that asset support all state and local contingencies, okay, all environmental contingencies of any type.
Okay, thank you very much. At this time, I now recognize the ranking member of the subcommittee, General Lady from Michigan, for questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And General, I noticed in your testimony you were talking about the CBP suffering from the pilot shortage. Maybe you could flesh that out a bit for me, because you were saying that the Congress has funded 24 pilot positions, but I think we actually funded 144 is what my notes are saying here. So how is all that working with the, and also I'm just interested, how do you train a pilot to do something like that? And is there anything that the subcommittee can do to help you with making sure you have adequate amounts of pilots and the resources that you need to train these individuals?
Well, the 24 pilots were pilots that were provided in the 209 budget. Those have been hired. They're in the process of being trained. The 144 number was the plus-ups we were looking at in 2010, which for internal budget reasons we did not get. All of those would not have been UAV pilots. A large part of those numbers were...
So not to interrupt, but that was an internal decision,
right,
not to fund those.
Right.
So the resources were shifted somewhere else internally.
Well, it was a matter of the budget issues associated with the 2011 budget and the changes we had to make, which would not be recurring in 2010 to get there. We did get, of that 144, about, I think, 24 slots, and some of those will go into UAV pilots. Now, in terms of training, this is probably the biggest bottleneck, you know, across the spectrum of users. Not only are we having issues, the United States Air Force is having users, as Secretary Gates is trying to grow the number of caps they have overseas. And it's interesting because this is all about unmanned things, but the reality is that UAVs are manpower intensive, especially the remotely piloted ones like the Predator, because not only do you have the pilots and the sensor operators and the intel kind of things, so very manpower intensive. In terms of training, the first aircraft, as you recall, we lost in 2006, one of the early prototypes of the Predator B. Pilot error, had nothing to do with the UAV, perfectly good airplane.
You lost contact with that aircraft, right?
The pilot cut off the engine. No, we never lost contact with that airplane. That was a contractor pilot being trained inappropriately on a contract flight who cut off the engine. There was a momentary loss link. It switched to the second control, which is the normal procedure in a Predator. The second set of flight controls were supposed to be in an operate mode. They were in cutoff mode. The guy was poorly trained, cut off the engines, didn't realize that the airplane continued to do what it was supposed to do until it hit the ground. So, I mean, that was a problem on its own. Since that time, we've aggressively, with the help and support initially from the United States Air Force and now with our own resources, we grow and train our own resources. We have more than 40 Air Marine pilots, dual qualified, FA certified, flying manned, fixed wing or rotary wing aircraft and Predator Bs as part of our infrastructure, and we have a small cadre of launch and recovery pilots, and we're growing that program. And there is no quick fix for that. It takes time. It takes
Okay, not to cut you off, but I have a limited amount of time here. And I did appreciate your narration of the video and taking the Predator to Oshkosh. I don't know if you plan on doing that when they have Oshkosh in 2 weeks, but with all of the activity that's going on there, I think it's very important and great that you get the buy-in of the general aviation community through the EAA, et cetera. And the FAA, I think, can also hear a wonderful input from people who are utilizing the airspace in so many different ways if they feel comfortable with these drones being out there. I think that is a critical component of us going forward, making sure. I would just also want to mention, Mr. Chairman, and for the committee as well, I think as a Congress and as a nation, we need to think always about utilizing, as I say, off-the-shelf hardware like the drones that the taxpayers have already paid for, that are being very successfully utilized in theater, in conflict, and how we meld those into Homeland Security as well. And I think we missed a big opportunity during the last BRAC, quite frankly. Maybe we weren't thinking about it, of how, as we were talking about military facilities around the nation and maybe using striker brigades and how those could be utilized by the National Guard for Homeland Security. Same thing with UAVs, how they could be utilized, and how we really meld the DoD and the Department of Homeland Security together in facilities around the nation. The ability as the General was just saying, you're doing these overlays at Air National Guards all over. I don't know if you're going to do that down at the Cape. Are you putting it at Patrick?
It's actually at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station.
Okay, so I don't know if there's Air National wing at Patrick, but it would be great to have a ground station there for what's happening with the Deepwater Horizon, et cetera, in the Gulf. And so I just think, I just generally want to, I think this committee can be helpful in talking to the entire Congress. We are going to have another BRAC at some point of how we utilize all of these various resources for the first and foremost responsibility of the federal government, which is to provide for the common defense. That is in the preamble of the Constitution. All these other issues are important, but nothing more important than national defense, homeland security, and I think as we can utilize some of these. Anyway, I'm a huge supporter, and I know I'm out of time. If I could just ask one other question quickly. What is the reaction of your Canadian counterparts to the UAVs and even some of the aerostats or other kinds of technology that you're utilizing there? They're very concerned about the thickening of the border. They are very concerned that we're overreacting to the threat sometimes, and they're our greatest neighbor and ally, and we always have to be sensitive to that. Thank you. General?
Shall I respond to that?
With the chairman's, thank you. I appreciate that.
When we stood up North Dakota, we took the UAVs up there. That was the first northern border deployment. And of course, we had a very strong presence of the Canadian Border Security and RCMP. And of course, behind the scenes, we have great partnerships with our law enforcement and security forces up north. I mean, through the IBID process and IBID process, there's a lot going on. On the aviation side, when we stood that up, that's the question that you get from mostly the media. The law enforcement types get it, but the Canadian media says, well, why are you militarizing the border? Why are you bringing these things up here? But the reality is, border security serves everybody well on both sides of the border, because the kind of things, the places we're flying, the things we're looking at, the things we're going after, the people who are in those areas are only up to no good, and it really serves the vast majority of the American and Canadian public well to have a secure force. And oh, by the way, I remind them, when we put this aircraft here, it's there to support contingencies. And it wasn't 3 months after we stood up North Dakota that we had that flood. And up in North Dakota, you may realize that the waters run north, and the Canadian government was on the edge of asking us to fly the Predator into Canadian airspace to help them with their flood support. So the reality is, and this is important for the American public, because once we put these aircraft in place, South Texas, when we get down to Corpus Christi, that'll be new. I get a lot of questions from San Antonio and Corpus. I mean, that's my hometown. But the reality is, when the airplane's there, we won't have to sortie an airplane down there to do response to hurricanes. And if there are tornadoes in other parts of the country that need a response, we won't have to deploy aircraft from halfway across the country to get there. This airplane with the EO, with the IR, with the laser designator, you can find people lost in the wilderness. You can find warm bodies in cold water. You can relay that information to manned recovery and response assets. It just brings more federal capability to state and locus that they would never have. I mean, if you were a local law enforcement type, your question in South Texas, wouldn't you like the same capabilities that the special operator warfighters have overseas in your hometown towards your mission? And once we're there, we support them as a priority.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to the ranking member. At this time, members, we do have one vote, so I'm going to ask the ranking, the chairman to go ahead and do the question, then we'll rush off and then come right back, because it's only just one vote. As members, just as you know, the rules recognize other members for questions according to committee rules procedure. We'll go with the start of the seniority who we got here first. But at this time, we'll go ahead and recognize the chairman of the full committee for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cuellar. Ms. Kolanowski? Yeah, okay, all right. I'm sure you've been called better or worse, just according. Your prepared testimony states that data does not support expedited or full integration of UASs. You further go on to say that the limited data you have suggests that accidents rates could potentially be higher. And your information is concerning. Can you explain that?
Yes, I can, sir. We have enjoyed a very positive working partnership with Customs and Border Protection in this past year, and they have been very forthcoming with their information and their data on their operations in the civilian NAS. We still need to understand and receive more data from our partners in the Department of Defense in order to fully understand all the safety challenges that we have with these unmanned aircraft systems.
Excuse me, what kind of information from DOD are you lacking?
Mr. Allen, would you like to address that?
Well, sir, information we would desire are accident rates, the true picture of how the aircraft performed in the combat environment in Iraq and Afghanistan, so we can get a better picture, understanding that that environment is totally different from the environment that we have here, but a full picture of how they've operated in the past and then how we will operate them in the future and get that data will give us a better understanding in terms of the risks that we are dealing with so that we can make the best decisions moving forward for safety.
How outstanding is that data request from DOD?
Well, sir, we're continually working on that on a continual basis. I would offer that sometimes it's a matter of understanding what data is asked for and how people perceive data. I know there's concerns of misinterpretation of data, and so concern of giving data misinterpreted and therefore not arriving at the right conclusion. So we've been working at this over at least the past year, and we're getting more data from them all the time. But the main point here is that explaining our conservative approach at times, because we want to make sure we ensure safety. The more data we get, then the more leaning forward we can be in providing access of the UAS to the NAS.
So you continue to request additional data?
We request and we work and we get it as well, sir.
So now, does that continuing to request data lengthen the time for the certificates of authorization to be issued?
No, sir, I would argue that it does not. It will help us strategically to provide guidance and improve our process, but I would argue that it doesn't provide a direct bearing on the time frame that we are approving these certificates of authorization.
When we're dealing with specific certificates of authorization, we will receive the information that we need in order to evaluate the safety case for that particular operation, whether it be for Customs and Border Patrol, Coast Guard, or for the Department of Defense or any other operation within the civilian NAS. What we're looking forward to is more complete understanding of how all the different aircraft operate, their accident rates, the problems that they may have had with lost link or communications, and the problems the challenges that we have found together in training pilots and bringing them forward into a safety management system. The more we understand about safety, the more we can work toward integration more fully into the national airspace system on a regular basis.
Thank you. I mentioned I was in Arizona last week, and along the southern border, Douglas, Arizona, the Tucson sector. It's difficult to say to the ranchers, a UAS is better than boots on the ground. One of the things, General, I think you'll need to provide the committee with is the successes or whatever justification for interdictions or what have you that have occurred within a period of time, so that the next time I'm there, I can be, pardon the pun, a little armed with information. We've had some difficulty, as you know, getting that hard data. Just for my information, we now buy Predator UASs, am I correct?
It is in the Predator family, but it's the MQ-9, not the MQ-1. So in the Air Force terminology, the Predator is the smaller one. The Reaper is the larger one, and the Predator B is the same as the Reaper. That's the one we're flying, the large Predator.
Thank you. Have we found an equal UAS that's cheaper than what we're paying now, that provides the same level?
No, so there's no real peer competitor on the world stage with the experience. This is from a family of Predator series vehicles, starting with the MQ-1, MQ-9, now then Reaper, and then the Guardian. These aircraft have flown more than 1 million hours, and that experience alone, there's no other UAV with that kind of experience, and that's part of the risk reduction.
Yeah, the experience is one thing, but the capability is the other. So your testimony is that from your experience, that capability does not exist anywhere else.
No, there is no peer competitor for the Predator B class with the equipment, the sensors, and the capability at this time.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, we are going to go ahead. We got actually non-time remaining, so we got to run up there, and we'll be right back. We'll go ahead and recess this committee meeting for a couple minutes till we get back, so at ease.